Hey guys, this is Wyatt here with the ultimate Cold War crash course for AP Euro. Let's get into it. Alright, imagine living in a world where two superpowers hated each other, both had nuclear weapons, and everyone feared World War III could begin at any moment. Welcome to the Cold War. After World War II ended in 1945, Europe was destroyed. Cities were ruined, millions were dead, and governments had collapsed. Out of the chaos came two dominant powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The US supported capitalism and democracy. The Soviet Union supported communism and dictatorship under one-party rule. Even though they had fought together against Nazi Germany, they quickly became enemies. And Europe became the main battlefield of this new conflict. This was the Cold War, a struggle for power and influence without direct, large-scale fighting between the US and the USSR. At the end of World War II, the Soviet Union occupied much of Eastern Europe. Joseph Stalin wanted a buffer zone of friendly communist countries to protect the USSR from future invasions. As a result, countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and East Germany became communist governments controlled by the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Western European nations like France, Britain, and West Germany aligned with the US. In 1946, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill described this divide by saying an iron curtain had fallen across Europe. The continent was now split into two sides. Western Europe was capitalist and democratic, and Eastern Europe was communist and controlled by the USSR. The US feared communism would continue spreading. To stop this, President Harry Truman introduced the Truman Doctrine in 1947, promising American support to countries resisting communism. The US also created the Marshall Plan, sending billions of dollars to rebuild Western Europe. This helped economies recover and made communism less attractive. The Soviets, however, rejected this aid, and they tightened control over Eastern Europe instead. Germany became one of the biggest Cold War problems. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the US, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Berlin, even though it was deep inside Soviet territory, was also divided. In 1948, Stalin tried to force the Western powers out of Berlin by blocking all roads and railways into West Berlin. This became known as the Berlin Blockade. Instead of giving up, the US and its allies launched the Berlin Airlift. For almost a year, planes delivered food, fuel, and supplies to West Berlin residents. Eventually, Stalin backed down. This crisis showed how serious tensions had become. Then, in 1961, East Germany built the Berlin Wall to stop people from escaping from communist East Berlin into democratic West Berlin. The wall became the ultimate symbol of the Cold War. One city completely divided by ideology. As tensions grew, both sides formed military alliances. In 1949, the US and Western European nations created NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, NATO's main idea was collective defense. If one member was attacked, all members would respond. In response, the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955 with Eastern European communist countries. Now, Europe was heavily militarized. Both sides stockpiled nuclear weapons, leading to the nuclear arms race. The fear of mutually assured destruction meant that if either side launched nuclear missiles, both sides would be completely destroyed. This fear actually prevented direct war between the superpowers, effectively creating the Cold War. Instead, the Cold War was fought through threats, propaganda, spying, and proxy wars all around the world. Life behind the Iron Curtain was very different from life in Western Europe. Eastern European governments limited free speech, censored media, and used secret police to silence opposition. People could be arrested for criticizing the government. Economies were centrally planned by the state, but shortages and low living standards were pretty common. Many people resisted Soviet control. For example, in 1956, Hungarians revolted against their communist government. Soviet tanks then crushed the uprising. And in 1968, Czechoslovakia attempted reforms during the Prague Spring, trying to create socialism with a human face. Again, Soviet forces invaded and ended the movement. These events showed that the Soviet Union would use military force to maintain their control over Eastern Europe. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was struggling economically. Maintaining military power and controlling Eastern Europe had become extremely expensive. Then Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms called glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring. These reforms loosened government control, but they also encouraged demands for freedom across Eastern Europe. In 1989, communist governments across the region began collapsing. Poland held free elections, Hungary opened its borders, mass protests also erupted in East Germany. Then came one of the most famous moments in modern history, the fall of the Berlin Wall. We all know this. Crowds of Germans tore down the wall in November 1989 as East and West Germany moved towards reunification. Just 2 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union itself collapsed. The Cold War in Europe was now over. The Cold War shaped Europe for nearly half a century. It divided nations, created military alliances, fueled fear of nuclear war, and influenced politics all around the world. Although the US and Soviet Union never fought directly in Europe, the tension between them did affect millions of lives. Even today, many political tensions in Europe trace back to Cold War divisions. The Cold War effectively ended. Thank you guys for watching. This was Crash Course AP European History.